Well, welcome again, everyone, to another edition of our content design meetup. Let's see. I need to start off just by saying thank you to all of our speakers who always, and all of you guys who join in, and all of our sponsors. So today, big thank you to Helen, who is our speaker for the day. Before we get into what she'll be talking about, just some quick organizational things. If you have questions for Helen throughout her talk, please save them and please write them in the chat anytime during the talk. Tam, Lara and I will be collecting all of your questions, and at the very end we'll be having a Q&A session where we'll throw all these questions at you, Helen, to have a bit of a discussion. So please feel free to post any questions you might have in the chat. Second thing, we are a meetup who is completely and totally volunteer run. So if you would like to donate a coffee, be that a $1 coffee or a 5 franc coffee, we are happy about anything. This pays for our meetup license as well as this Zoom call we're in right now. I think, Tam, you'll post the link of the Ko-Fi page. And we also have a website if you ever want to see what we've been up to or check out all the recordings that we've been, that we have. Our website would be the place to go. All right, that's all I'm going to say for today, all the boring stuff. Today's talk, I'm sure you all know, is going to be about overcoming the challenges of joining a new company in a senior content design role. So now that this job, this profession of content designer, of UX writing has been around for a little while, maybe you've made that next step. Maybe you're joining a company not as a junior, an amateur, or not amateur, just a new joiner. Maybe you're joining as a senior. Maybe you're taking over a team. And Helen, you'll be talking about the fact that maybe you'll be feeling something like an imposter syndrome when you join, or maybe you're battling against insecurities. And this is exactly where she's got a couple of tips for you, and can speak from experience how to overcome all of these small hiccups on the road towards being a more secure and self-confident senior content designer. All right, and I think without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Helen, and let you introduce yourself and get started with the talk. So thank you so much for being here. The stage is yours.
Thanks, Fiona. Welcome everybody. I really appreciate you joining. It's nice to have this platform. So thank you very much to Fiona, Laura, and Tamara for this opportunity. And today I'm going to be talking about, as Fiona said, the challenges that you may face when you join a new company, or it could even be in the same company, but you have that next step. You've achieved the promotion maybe you've been after, but then alongside that comes a lot of questions and doubts that you might have. It's worth saying at the beginning, though, that I know we're all very different. We're all very different types of humans, have different ways of reacting to things, and what I'll be talking about today is my experience and my personal suggestions that I've found have worked for me. But of course, other things might work. You might have different challenges as well. So we can have a chat about those, because I'd be really interested to hear from others' perspectives as well. But I'll start. So firstly, a little bit about me. Because I think it always helps to have a little personal side, understand where I'm coming from, what my background is. So I'm British. I'm from the UK, but I moved to France in 2009. That's when at the tender age of 18. There's my picture in front of the Eiffel Tower. I went there to do my studies in Paris, ended up staying and working there. And then I moved back to the UK for a few years, and I found my way back because I met my husband in Paris, actually. And this year we officially tied the knot. And so that's really the main reason why I'm here. But now we're in Toulouse in the southwest of France, very nice part of France if you ever get a chance to visit. And then because I had to mention my cat because he was in my bio, I had to show a picture of him. And this is exactly the position he was in when I was preparing for this talk. So I thought you might appreciate if you're a cat lover. And there are some more things to come if you're a cat lover. So more about me professionally now, and really the basis of my experiences that I'm going to be talking about. So it goes back to 2012 when I started at booking.com as a content editor. I'm cheating a bit because it wasn't really content designer or UX writer, but at that point, the field was still very, very new. Even booking.com were not calling the people in that position UX writers or content designers. And I included it because it was my first experience into the world of content management, designing for a website, writing for a certain audience, all those kind of things. And really that experience is what led me into the content design profession in 2016 at gov.uk. And gov.uk, if you don't know, is the UK's citizen-facing platform and website. So you go there to do anything that you need to do to interact with government. And I was there for 5 years, so quite a long time, and the longest time I've spent somewhere so far. And what came with that was a real comfort zone I managed to create there, because over 5 years, as you can imagine, you accumulate a lot of knowledge, a lot of experiences. And then also while I was there, I had a great team, and it was very consistent. It was very secure. I was with the same management and team throughout the whole time. So I was thriving to some extent, I would say. But I knew professionally and personally in particular that I was ready then for that next challenge. The COVID years had passed, and I was being called back to France, of course, to settle. So I was looking for opportunities over the pond, and Open Classrooms was where I headed. So I joined that team as senior content designer. It was a big change for me. They were a smaller team. I was joining as senior content designers. There wasn't any other seniors at that stage as well. So I was coming with a lot of expectations as to what that might mean for them and what they were looking for in me. It was also pretty much in French. So Open Classrooms is an online education platform predominantly based in France or operating in France, but they also have quite a good growth going on in the US right now. And it was fully remote, even though we'd had taster of it during those COVID years. It was knowing for sure I'm going in this and I'm never going to go into an office and meet someone. So, well, eventually, but not from day one and not every day. So those were the changes I was facing there. And then not so long after, actually, at the beginning of this year, I joined Conto. I had the opportunity presented itself to me. And Conto is a fintech, is a finance management solution for independents and small to medium-sized businesses. We're operating right now in France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, potentially one day further. But if you are in France, I would say you've heard of Conto, and in particular from a design product perspective, they're doing a lot of really good things. And what was so appealing as well about Conto is that they have a very clear defined career track. So for UX writers, content designers, that's important because it's now becoming a profession where there's more of us, and it's great. But then what that means is what does it mean for your career? And so they have very clear leadership track and an expertise mastering your craft track. And that was something that really appealed to me. But you can always interchange between the two. So there I am today, expert. And I'm going to go through some of those challenges that I've faced and talk about some specific examples. But also I wanted to say before I start, like, why I decided to talk about this today is because maybe you've had a similar path, maybe it's been completely different, but I feel like it's a topic that we can probably all relate to, I hope, because even if you haven't had a promotion in recent years or in your content design career, you've probably started at some point in your career in a new work environment, and all of these things could easily come up in that situation as well. So that's why I decided to talk about it. So it's not really, I'm not going to be talking about what it takes to become a senior or what you would expect as a senior content designer, more about how you approach that change. You've got it, but how do you approach that change, and what kind of posture would then maybe be expected of you, and what is the reality really, because we do throw a lot of expectations on ourselves. So that brings me nicely into the first challenge which I had, which was battling insecurities. So like I said at the beginning, some of us maybe experience this more than others, and we have different degrees of how we deal with it, and it will show its face at some point. But for me, when I went from that period of being in the same workplace for 5 years, I had promotions during that time, so it wasn't necessarily new to me to have to take on more responsibility and have more to learn. It was more that I was completely changing my environment, and the main thing that was challenging for me here, and that was creating all the insecurities, was that it was like, oh, I've got to prove myself again. I've got to prove that I can be here and I can do this job. And that was the most daunting thing for me at this time. So my first 6 months, I would say, in that role at Open Classrooms, was, as I spent a lot of energy really overthinking things all the time, putting a lot of expectations on what others might be expecting of me, but also on myself, and we all have an ego at the end of the day as well. And so when you've had maybe a positive experience in the past and you feel like you have the respect of the colleagues and what you do, and then you're in a completely new environment and working from the beginning again, and that's what overtook, let's say, in those first 6 months. And I was doubting myself, and it meant that I wasn't as strong in my convictions as I could have been, and that I know that I had the experience and the ability to do. It was just my more unease of the challenge that I put myself in. And by no means did the environment create that. The environment was very supportive, not at all in any way. It was all me that was creating this. So after the 6 months, because in the end, time is always something that's going to help, but after this first 6 months passed, I eased into things, and I was able to look back and think, why did I spend all that time worrying about what others would expect of me, and being able to give a voice. And it wasn't long after that actually I was presented with it potentially again with joining Conto as an expert, so even at a higher level. So some of the things that I did differently when I joined Conto. So the first one was, I actually made myself, it's quite simple in theory, but I make myself each week do a personal retrospective. So just like one that you would do with your feature team on a project you've worked on, where you might discuss what went well, what didn't go well. That's something that I do for myself almost every week. Bi-weekly is probably more achievable. But there and then I can see exactly what I did that last week that went well for me, and what I could do better, and anything that I would want to start or stop doing. And it just helped keep any of those insecurities at bay, that actually I am adding value here. It gives you tangible things to work on. And so that was one of the first things that I could say. Oh, and also an additional benefit of doing this, I found, is that if you're like me and you procrastinate a lot when it comes to performance reviews or yearly appraisals, those kind of progress reviews, you have there and then a list of things that you could pull out, or even preparing for an interview, for example. You're keeping on top of what your achievements are and what your areas of improvement are. The second one is having acceptance. So it sounds pretty simple. It's much harder than it sounds, but really just knowing from day one, I don't need to know everything, and I won't. That it's a fact. Unfortunately, at Conto, for me, my manager was very supportive of that and made sure that I was very aware that I didn't need to know everything, that we have the time to build that knowledge. And finally, committing to continuous improvement. So this is something that if you're feeling insecure, you might feel, it might feel so unnatural to then say, I'm going to expose myself and I'm going to talk about the things, or I'm going to raise my hand for things that haven't gone well, or say something's not working. But really, I would encourage you to do it, because it really breaks down that feeling of it has the opposite effect of exposing yourself. It's actually exposing yourself in a good way, that you're willing to learn. And at Conto, if I mean, I could spend an hour talking about it actually, but we have a certain methodology that we all that the company runs by, called the Conto Way. If you're interested, there's lots online about it. But one of the pillars of this is heavily inspired by the Toyota production system. But one of the pillars is that we continuously improve, and we're committed to, every time something doesn't go quite accordingly to plan, whether it be in delivery, or that we had to rework something, or that we have some sort of waste somewhere, we'll get together and decide what was the problem for that, why did that happen, and what can we do to avoid it. And because everyone's on the same page with this, it's really helped me commit to improving and making sure that I'm not worried about failing. It's not being afraid to fail. So if I move on, the next challenge that I had was knowledge building. So like I said before, the accepting that you're not going to know everything. And this is really important, because wherever you are, or you start a new workplace, you're probably going to have a new product. I mean, even if you're in the same workplace, you might move teams and work on a different part of the product. So there's going to be maybe new user profiles to get to know. You're going to have new processes. The way that things are done, they differ everywhere. You may have, with content design and UX writing, what I found is that I started with just English only, and then I had English and French, and now I have 3 other languages that I don't actually speak, and all of the challenges that can bring when you know your copy and your design is going to be localized. So lots and lots to learn along the way. And what I found is that when you're in the position of senior content designer, the posture that is expected, and rightly so, is that you have the ability to challenge things. You're able to identify where there are opportunities to improve, maybe on processes, maybe on a particular feature itself. But all of those things are, for me, were always in my mind. But what I found is that when I come to the actual solutions of what worked for me, is actually taking a step back and, like I say, accepting I don't know everything. I've got to observe, I have to learn, I have to practice. You have to really give yourself that time to get to know those parts of the knowledge gaps that you absolutely are gonna have. And with this as well, we have for example, if I give an example at Conto, what I found is that the process of the way that things were done were different to my previous workplace, and they worked in my previous workplace. So why would we be doing it this way? And that's your knee-jerk reaction, is maybe this is something that they could do better, because I'm used to doing it a different way before. But instead, I stepped back. I said, no, I'm going to live it. I'm going to understand. I'm going to try and understand why it's done this way. I'm going to save myself some time. to before coming in. And because you might have this expectation that, okay, if I'm in a senior position and there's this expectation that they want me for suggestions, to make changes, to improve things, have that gesture that we would have, then you might want to be doing it from day one. But my advice here, and what I found, is that I felt much more comfortable. Like I said before, I had those first 6 months at Open Classrooms where I was doubting my convictions and not really expressing them very well. And it was for fear that I was going to say something that wasn't going to sound like it was relevant or important enough. But instead, here, I made sure that I stepped back, actually got used to everything and how everything works, asked questions along the way, and lived those models. Because then what it's ended up doing is me realizing, okay, actually, maybe this way does work, because we have less rework, or we're producing better quality. It's just more intensive in the moment that it's happening. And then you can actually prioritize as well the things that you have maybe recognized along the way that could be improved. Now, I'm speaking from the perspective of someone joining a team, and a well-established team. That's been my experience so far. I understand if you're the only content designer, which is a lot of often the case, you might have a different approach here, or even more challenges to face, and maybe not always that gift of time to get to take on that extra knowledge. So let's see at the end if any of you want to have a conversation about that. And next, the final challenge, but not really the final one, but the final one I'm going to talk today is about demonstrating my values. So this is more around demonstrating my value as a UX writer, content designer, in that senior position, not necessarily a team member. So you've got to gain the respect of your colleagues. That's a given. And we have, as content designers, UX writers, this big chip on our shoulder, I think, with making sure that we're there at the right moment, we're there early enough, we have that metaphorical seat at the table. So we already have this coming with us. But then the good thing is that we've got experience of coming at it from the hard way. So then any sort of situation where then you're going to move to a new team, or you're going to move to a new company and have to just slot in there, hopefully you've had some time to sort of ease to things. But really, it is from day one. My question here when I joined Conto was, okay, I'm getting put on a project. Where is it that I'm going to add value from day one when I know absolutely nothing about the feature that I'm working on? So for example, my first project at Conto was working on something for the Italian market and about filing taxes in Italy. So I had absolutely no prior experience or knowledge of that feature, the users that we have on that feature. But from day one, I was working with a product manager and a product designer. And that's something that I've done before, and nothing that I had to be fearful about. And the trio that we have and the ways of working, I was able to pull on from my previous experiences and know how I best work as a content designer with those roles. And then we also would have other similarities that you could find. The actual tasks that we do as UX writers would not differ from workplace to workplace. We have doing user testing, doing a competitor teardown, researching terminology that we should be using. We have all of those things that come natural to us and that are our hard skills. That's hard skills as UX writers that we can lean on in those moments of, okay, I've just joined this project. It's a challenging one. That's why I've been assigned to it, maybe because you have the experience or you're needed. That's why you were hired. And I'm going to need some time to actually get to know the subject matter. But ultimately, there's a reason why we're in this job, and we can really pull on those hard skills. And that's something that I found I was able to do. And all of these things together have kept my insecurities at bay. You'll find that for example, the solution that I gave for the battling insecurities, doing a personal retro and really recognizing your achievements on a week by week and just seeing your growth that way. That's a way of being able to demonstrate your value. And then the things that you could do better are probably going to be things where you need to fill a gap in your knowledge or your skill set. And that's something then that you have a tangible action to take to do that. So hopefully you've resonated with some of those things. But I am going to now open it up for discussion because I've been chatting a lot. And so I would be interested to hear from anyone who would like to talk, if that's possible. Is it possible to open up the floor? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Maybe like I said, maybe one of you is on your own and you might not always have the privilege of a support system in a content design sense. Let's see.
Cool. Let me just take over here right now because I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. And maybe I'll try and get the floor started. And if anyone wants to chip in, wants to turn on their camera, wants to turn on just their audio, please feel free to do so at any time. I'll just try and get the conversation started by taking your comment, Boris. I hope that's all right. I'll just read it, and if you want to chip in, please feel free to also turn on your audio. But basically, Boris has written in the comments that one thing that has helped him is to have like one-on-one chats over coffee or Zoom to number one, relate to stakeholders and product teams. Number two, help the stakeholders and product team members understand his role. So I assume this is also a content design role, role in making their project a success, and also making sure he's invited to all of the necessary calls. So kind of that one-to-one, connecting with people within the company. Is that also something that you have experience in, or do you have the same opinion there?
Absolutely. I would for sure advocate for one-on-one informal chats, because often as well what you'd find there is that you can find similarities, maybe not necessarily professional but personal, and it just helps create that bond with someone from the beginning and get their buy-in ultimately when you need it. And that is something that really helps with it was actually something that Conto recommended I do, is I have one-to-one chats with all of my peers, my UX writing team, and then those people that I'll be working with in my multidisciplinary teams. And yeah, it absolutely helped. And then there as well, you can make sure that you're involved where you need to be.
That metaphorical seat at the table that you eloquently mentioned. We have a question relating to Boris's comment from Tess. She's wondering if you have a strategy regarding like holding one-on-ones when you first start in a team or at a company. So for example, are you trying to learn their concerns and needs, maybe in relation to like your new role, or are you rather trying to sway hearts and minds already on the first encounter? So maybe Boris, if you want to turn on the audio, feel free, or else I'll give the question handed over to you, Helen.
Yeah, I can take that. So actually something that I found recently is that, because we have quite a lot of new people joining, actually we're growing quite a bit, Conto, and we're hiring, by the way. I need to say that we really would like anyone who's interested in a UX writing position, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. We are hiring, and I highly recommend you come and join us. We're a very lovely team. But yeah, on a side note, because we're hiring a lot at Conto, we have a lot of new people joining. This is quite a common thing that we're finding, is you have coffees with new people, and what I've found is that actually the one-to-ones not only as you're saying, trying to learn their concerns. For me, it's been more about, say, for example, with a product designer, to understand how is it that you like to work with a content designer, because they also have their own preferences. We do as content designers too. And right from the beginning, then you're setting off on a good foot together. You might do the same as well with a product manager. But I would say with a product designer, for example, or UX designer, however they might be called at your workplace, we have that common problem of stepping on one another's toes and maybe having some overlap in the tasks. So I did this recently with a new product designer that joined Conto after me. So even then I felt old and like I'd been there a long time. And he said, I've never worked with a UX writer before. How does that work? You know, so it was a really great moment to set that together, what we would expect from one another. And it's also something that I did at open classrooms with the different members of the team. A lot of them didn't really know what a UX writer was. And in that informal moment, it's the perfect time to say to a front-end developer, well, this is how we're going to be able to work together. I'm going to need your expertise on this, and you can lean on me for this. I think that was the biggest thing for me, rather than at that stage having to influence too much on but it might be as well personality types of how we are and how we like to go about those things.
So you like the more of the collaborative approach, right? Like, how are we going to be able to solve a problem together? Yeah, I like that. Maybe this kind of feeds in, this question that I've got here kind of feeds in with that, what you've been saying. So there's one question asking, like, you mentioned that, you know, showing your hard skills is definitely something you can do to show that you're, you know, like you're at the right place, you're in the right level. What about soft skills? Do you see the soft skills like as an asset as well that can help you, you know, make yourself feel at the right place and in the right level within the company? Or is it rather the hard skills that are relevant, basically?
I think for me, the hard skills were important in this experience that I've had most recently of joining at Expert, because I knew at some point my soft skills were going to have to come in to, like we say, do the influencing or being able to have a critical eye on certain things. But from the very beginning, the thing that I could rely on is, okay, I might not know the other people. I might not know exactly where there are issues or challenges or pain points, but I do know how to set up user testing. And so that's where I'm going to start. And that's what I would recommend, is that it sounds really simple because we should be doing that. That's maybe the job criteria that we have. But I think it just helps you more easily slot in and stay in your comfort zone at those first few weeks or months that you're going to have in that position. And then you can ease more into where you might lean on your soft skills and have maybe more challenging conversations. You might have people you're managing as well. And I think for me, I've managed in the past, but it's not something that I'm doing at Conto. But I can understand how before if you're going in to lead a team, before you can do that, it might be good to get on the ground. You might not necessarily have in your job description that you need to get in with the operational work, production work, but why not go and shadow and watch and see how your team members work? Because that's really then where you're going to feel much more confident in supporting them and helping them recognize where they can develop and fighting the fires on their behalf, empowering them to do certain things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the time.
This is actually great because, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, Helen.
No, go on.
I was just about to say, this is great because the next question we have kind of ties in with that last thing that you just mentioned. So like, one question that we got is like, how do you make, or how do you get the time? How do you make the time to do, you know, research, asking why things are done in a certain way at the same company? Is there like, what would you recommend if you come to a new company and you feel like there's not much room to do that, not much time and space to do that? Do you have any tips there?
That one is a harder one for me because I have been privileged, I think, in that I've had very supportive environments for having this time. But for sure, any product development setting is often fast paced and demanding, and so you're gonna want to get involved as soon as possible as well. I think in that respect, I think I saw earlier that there is the thing like I'm new as the excuse, but it's not necessarily an excuse. It's a way to highlight that I'm new. I might not know as much about this, but this is what I'm going to do today, and sort of being very transparent and open in how you're working. And when you're taking time to shadow other people or read documentation, watch previous recordings that might be available in the company to really just get to know the product. And I think one of the first things to do before getting involved in anything is to have someone, if there is someone available, with the ability to just walk you through the actual product and give you that experience, or experience it for yourself. I think just working transparently is probably the best way to help, rather than say I'm terrible at this actually, but I'm aware of it, so I like to think that that's helpful. But saying no and saying no, I've not got time for that today, it's actually setting your boundaries, and maybe in those early days saying, okay, this is what I want to achieve by the end of the week. I want to know XYZ, and so I'm going to put away 1 hour or 2 hours a day specifically for this, and therefore I'm only available during this time. But making it clear to those others that the reason why you're doing it and what the payoff will be for them as well, that you're investing that time.
Cool. Just FYI, I'll read you. So Boris mentioned in answer to what you answered to the question that was posed to him. He's saying that your answer was really spot on. So he likes to ask about, you know, the stakeholders' preferred, or your collaboration partners, about their preferred communication style, for example. Do they prefer to communicate via Slack, email, smoke signals, sending a pigeon? And always asking, like, how can I make your life more easier? So that's kind of a very a nice way of putting those one-to-ones into perspective. Like, what do we want to get from those in the beginning? Yeah, so just as a response to what you've been saying, Helen. And we do have another question from Bridget, who's asking, how do you go about challenging approaches at a new company? So for example, Bridget's company relies a lot on competitor analysis to make decisions. And Bridget prefers to design experiences with our specific customers in mind. So how does she, you know, persuade them to stop copying the competition and do more research and testing? How do you go about these so challenging approaches that are already kind of ingrained in the company culture? That's the question.
Thank you, Bridget, for that question. It's not easy. I would say that, I mean, I'm sure it's been broached before that the competitor analysis is great as a foundation, and you're going to learn what is working from an assumption point of view, but actually what you don't know is whether it's not working, right? So by taking all of the suggestions or relying heavily on that, you could actually be harming your own. So it's all about the balance. But I can see you recognize that if you are asking how you would challenge it. So testing for sure. And actually, this is something that I was surprised when I joined Conto at how testing wasn't necessarily a thing that we do every time. So for example, if I go back to when I worked at gov.uk, it was if you were on a service building a digital service for citizens, then you tested. It was just the really one of the only ways in which you knew whether the content worked or not, because we didn't have too much access to many other things. But then what I found in my latest experiences is that you don't always have the time, or it's not always prioritized because you're working at such a fast pace and trying to decide what is it that we're going to do now. But actually with testing, there are a lot of little things that you can do without investing a lot of time. So you don't necessarily need to have a user researcher there and then able to help you, if you might not even have that role anyway in the organization. Instead, I would set up testing with other employees. I mean, it's better. It's not necessarily the end user, but it's better than no testing, especially when it comes to copy and understanding, getting validating an assumption that you would have, or about how they would understand, how they would read. So that's something that we do actually regularly in Conto, because we're fortunate that some of the people that work there also are Conto users. They have an account with us. So we are always putting a call out for just book a 15-minute slot in my agenda, and I'm going to test you something with no context, and see how you respond. So that's it. At least provides you that reassurance that you've shown it to someone outside of the project, and you have a little bit of a ground. So that's, I would say, is one of the easier ways to go, and it doesn't provide much investment from the other people in your organization. And then from there, if you can, this by all means, you'll probably get good results and just good insights straight away. You then have a case for saying, okay, let's look into an asynchronous testing tool that we could use, like Maze, or that would require some investment, but is still something that we can do without much organization and much time, and go from there. And that would be my suggestion.
Start small, basically.
Yes.
All right. I think maybe one last question. A question just now came in, so I'll use this as a basis. Question that might be a little bit off topic. I have been looking for work in the USA. I lived in the UK for years, and we never had to use Figma as a UX writing tool, as a UX writer. We coordinated with our designers. How do I explain on my CV that I am a noob in Figma without losing out on getting a senior role? Also, designers in the USA feel like their toes are being stepped on because UX writers are attempting Figma and UX writers. Yeah, I think like the main question is what kind of what are other assets I could put on my CV, right, without going into that design tool situation that this isn't my strong suit, basically, and how to handle this in an interview on the CV, basically. And is this still something that I could, is a senior role still open to me, even though Figma isn't my strong suit? There we go. I hope I summarized that all right.
That's actually, I really empathize with that, because I'm terrible at Figma. I mean, I will remove something and then I see everything goes out of whack, and I'm like, oh my God, now I've got to ping the product designer because I don't know how to fix it. Yeah, it's not the most friendly tool for content designers. It's a great collaborative tool, so I don't have any hesitation in why it's being used. But for me, if I were hiring a UX writer, it wouldn't be important that you are an expert in using Figma. I think there are those basics of the tool that there's so many resources online that can help you just play around with it and get used to it. And I don't think it should ever block you from becoming a senior content designer or UX writer. The reason being is that at that stage anyway, we are wanting to collaborate, and we have an expertise, and our expertise has design elements for sure, but it's not mastering Figma. That's not what is ultimately going to bring delight to a user or help a user through their experience. So I wouldn't hide the fact that you are not a designer on Figma, and that you know how to create different types of flows and interactions and things like that. Really highlight instead all the things that we can bring as a content designer to someone who would be using that tool. So what kind of collaboration can we do on Figma? How can we see that the copy, how it influences the design? But of course, yes, you're going to need someone to help you with the design, but that's really where we're adding value, and why using a tool like that is important, but not the be all and end all of us starting from that and being the owner of that. It's the collaboration that we would have with the product designer, and making it easier as well to the stakeholders or the end user, as to what it might look like, and it could look like, and what the copy is. So that's something that, what we don't want to happen is that product designers are off designing things on their own, and we're sort of sending them a copy by Word document or something to just plug in, and we don't really understand what's happening to the design. So there is a basic need to use it, be able to change words on it, view it, navigate around it. But if you can instead highlight the reason why we do that, then that's more important than saying, yes, I know, I have a full command of Figma. I hope that helps. This is something that I suppose, yeah, we could talk about in another talk, which is, how do we deal with all of these tools, and then all the expectations that come with us being called content designers. But actually the design aspect of our job is in the decisions that we make for the copy that we create, the user research that we do, the analysis that we would do, the testing that we would do. Those are all things that then contribute to the design aspect of the job.
I love that answer, and I think that's such a nice way to round off this talk. It's a hopeful view on UX writers not needing to be super women and supermen with every single tool checked off their list. So we can be confident in what we're good at, and the hard skills, as you've mentioned them, Helen, that we bring as content designers and UX writers. So thank you so much for that. I think that's a very nice way to round it all off.